power worked, but none knew whence it came. We are seeing the release of Aswapati's soul from ignorance. And in that release is his first spiritual change. Everything is beginning to pour down from above and to open out from within. And it is this power that is working, but none knew whence it came. But the universal strengths were linked with his, and they filled Earth's smallness with their boundless breaths. So let's read a few lines. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. The universal strengths were linked with his, filling Earth's smallness with their boundless breaths. And then we have page 45, which will end Canto 3. Sri Aurobindo tells us through Aswapati, he drew the energies that transmute and age. Immeasurable by the common look, he made great dreams a mold for coming things, and cast his deeds like bronze to front the years. His walk through time outstripped the human stride. Lonely his days, and splendid like the sun's. We see here so clearly Sri Aurobindo speaking of himself as the avatar. He drew these energies that are powerful enough to transmute an age. And these great dreams that are immeasurable by our common look, he makes a mold for coming things. And he casts his deeds like bronze to front the years. And then he says his walk through time outstripped the human stride. But he ends the canto speaking of himself, only his days, and splendid like the sun's. Those who have met Sri Aurobindo spoke of an austerity that seemed to be in him, and yet, even though it seemed alone, and to be alone with the alone was everything, as Amal used to tell me. But it was yet splendid, like the sun's. I remember Temi telling me that she was 17 years old when her father brought her to the first darshan of Sri Aurobindo. And she entered the room, and his eyes fixed on her, and she lost it all. She remembers nothing more from that point on, except his eyes burning into her. Others have told me so many different things. I myself have had many beautiful experiences. So there is no doubt that his days, though challenging, because he says that the avatar has to go through everything that we would face, only to 1,000 degrees more, perhaps. So this is the end of Canto 3, and now we go into one of the cantos that is my favorite in all of Savitri. And it's very interesting to me how Sri Aurobindo puts this in between the two cantos of Ashwapati, his search and then his final realization. And he gives us the secret knowledge. And the first line is so extraordinary. On a height he stood that looked towards greater heights. Well, this is Ashwapati and Sri Aurobindo. But that's the only line in which he speaks of himself for a long time. Because now he begins to tell us about ourselves and where we are, the state we are in, our early approaches to the infinite, and what is going to happen with this human soul of ours. So let me just read about 10 lines because one shouldn't break this up too much. Our early approaches to the infinite are sunrise splendors on a marvelous verge, while lingers yet unseen the glorious sun. What now we see is a shadow of what must come. The earth's uplook to a remote unknown is a preface only of the epic climb of human soul from its flat earthly state to the discovery of a greater self and the far gleam of an eternal light. Well, if this doesn't inspire us, I don't know what could. These are our early approaches to the infinite. And they are just a sunrise, but it's a splendor, a sunrise splendor. And it's on a marvelous verge of life, while the unseen, glorious sun still lingers. We have not seen that glorious sun as yet. Sri Aurobindo speaks so much about the light that I've recounted to you previously. This light of the sun that doesn't really produce light. The physical sun is only receiving the light of the divine. Then he goes on to tell us that what now we see is only a shadow of what must come. Why is that? Well, we are looking with eyes that are not really seeing. Very often, Temia, again, used to tell me about not being blind, but unseeing. The ability or the problem of not being able to see. So he continues, the earth's uplook to a remote unknown. And notice that he capitalizes the U of unknown. It is so important here. Is a preface only of the epic climb of human soul from its flat earthly state to the discovery of a greater self and the far gleam of an eternal light. A gleam is like a faint ray. It's not there yet because we cannot do this alone. It is for us, no doubt, an epic climb. And we are beginning to discover this greater self. And some of us are beginning to feel or to see just a far gleam of an eternal light. But this is why Mother came here because we cannot do it with what we have alone in our souls. She has to work in us. If we can offer to her everything, she will lift it. I have experienced it time and time again. Something that would not move, would not change, did not want to change, when totally offered to her, was taken up just like that. And I had others tell me of this also. Aurobindo Basu was one. Now, Sri Aurobindo continues. This is a whole section just about us. This world is a beginning and a base where life and mind erect their structured dreams. Semicolon. An unborn power must build reality. So we see that this world, this earth he's speaking of now, this evolutionary earth, is a beginning and a base. And that is true. We feel that. We feel that there is a continuity here, that we'll be reincarnated. We'll come again in different bodies and continue to progress. But life and mind here erect their structured dreams. And this is an interesting line, because the structured dreams of life and mind are not really very much. They're extremely limited. Oh, we have heard of great minds. We know of geniuses. We know of children who can play the piano brilliantly at the age of 3 or 4. And I have many videos of this also. Well, that may be, shall we say, above and beyond what most of humanity can do when they erect their structured dreams. Therefore, an unborn power, capital P, and notice that he also capitalized light, life, and mind, in addition to unknown, and now power. So this unknown power that must build reality has come, and it is the supermind. Previous to this, prior to this, we did not have the supermind. Therefore, there was no possibility of a collective transformation. It is there now. He continues, a death-bound littleness is not all we are. Immortal, our forgotten vastnesses await discovery in our summit selves. Unmeasured breadths and depths of being are ours. So now he tells us that we have much more than we think is ours. First of all, this death-bound littleness is definitely not all we are, because this self of ours, at its highest pitch, will find forgotten vastnesses immortal, and unmeasured breadths and depths of being that are ours. Oh, how beautiful this passage is. And then he continues. This is not all complete as yet. akin to the ineffable secrecy, mystic, eternal in unrealized time, neighbors of heaven are nature's altitudes. Whoa. So we are related to this ineffable secrecy. Yes, it is mystic. It is eternal in unrealized time. But nature's altitudes are the neighbors of heaven. Now he continues. Oh, this is all so powerful and beautiful. We should read it frequently. To these high-peaked dominions sealed to our search, too far from surface nature's postal routes, too lofty for our mortal lives to breathe, deep in us a forgotten kinship points, and a faint voice of ecstasy and prayer calls to those lucent, lost immensities. Well, we have to read Savitri always slowly. We have to pay attention even to what we would call simple words, because no word in Savitri has been placed there without the highest consciousness at work in Sri Aurobindo. He has spoken or written of this quite widely in his letters on Savitri, which you should all read. Just read a few of them, maybe one each day for a while, and you will see how this master poet has brought down from the highest overmind planes these lines. To these high-peaked dominions sealed to our search, too far from surface nature's postal routes, too lofty for our mortal lives to breathe, deep in us a forgotten kinship points, and a faint voice of ecstasy and prayer calls to those lucent, lost immensities. So, even though these high-peaked dominions are sealed to our search, and they are too far from this surface nature's, look at the humor here, postal routes, and they are too lofty also for our mortal lives to breathe. But yet, Sri Aurobindo tells us that deep in us, a forgotten kinship points. We are a family. We're definitely a family of souls who have come in answer to the call of Sri Aurobindo and Mother to be here on this earth at this specific time when the divine has determined that there was the possibility of a great ascent, a great evolutionary forward thrust. And that is what was brought down by Sri Aurobindo and Mother in their great labor that is often called the Holocaust of the divine. So deep in us, we have this forgotten kinship. And what does it pointing to? Well, there's a faint voice of ecstasy and prayer. And I think everyone who is reading Savitri understands that very, very clearly. It calls to those lucent, lost immensities. What else is prayer? If it is not arrogant and egotistical, it is certainly an aspiration for something higher. And even this faint voice of ecstasy, that word ecstasy is so beautiful. That inner joy that cannot be even fully understood through the word joy, but more so through the word ecstasy. And it calls to those lost immensities. Why are they lost? Well, they were once ours before we took birth. They were all ours. We lived in those planes. The divine has poured himself into us because he wants to experience other realms of himself. And then we come to this absolutely extraordinary passage, which gives us such hope, such beauty and promise for the future. Even when we fail to look into our souls or lie embedded in earthly consciousness, still have we parts that grow towards the light. Yet are there luminous tracts and heavens serene and Eldorados of splendor and ecstasy and temples to the Godhead none can see. I will take that up a little more fully next week. And Soumya, would you read for us today from the beginning? On a height he stood?
Sure.
Thank you.
On a height he stood that looked towards higher heights.
Greater heights.
Oh, greater heights. Our early approaches to the infinite, our sunrise splendors on a marvelous verge, while lingers yet unseen the glorious sun. What now we see is a shadow of what must come. The earth's uplook to a remote unknown is a preface only of the epic climb of human soul from its flat earthly state to the discovery of a greater self and the far gleam of an eternal light. This world is a beginning and a base where life and mind erect their structured dreams. An unborn power must build reality. A death-bound littleness is not all we are. Immortal our forgotten vastness, await discovery in our summit selves, unmeasured breadths and depths of being are ours, akin to the ineffable secrecy, mystic, eternal, in unrealized time, neighbors of heaven or nature's altitude. To these high-peaked dominions, sealed to our search, too far from surface nature's postal routes, too lofty for our mortal lives to breathe, deep in us a forgotten kingship points, and a faint voice of ecstasy and prayer calls to those lucent, lost immensities. Even when we fail to look into our souls or lie embedded in earthly consciousness, still have we parts that grow towards the light. Yet o'er these luminous tracks and heaven serene and Eldorados of splendor and ecstasy and temples of the Godhead none can see.
Thank you so much.